Queen of the Empire, ruled over 50 star systems with a voice that could silence entire battalions. Her throne room was a place where even hardened generals bowed with trembling hands. The shining walls, made from rare crystal stone, reflected her golden presence like a goddess among mortals. Every alien who entered the hall feared her judgment, for a single command from her could destroy a moon or command a fleet to war. But on this day, something unusual happened, something the queen had never faced in her long reign. The palace guards dragged in a lone human prisoner, a simple man with worn clothes and calm eyes. His name was Hale, and he looked nothing like a warrior. No armor decorated him, no weapon hung at his side, and no symbols showed loyalty to any known army. Yet when he lifted his head to face the queen, his gaze did not hold fear. It held peace. Watched him closely from her elevated throne. Her long white hair flowed down her shoulders like frozen starlight, and her crown glowed with soft blue energy. She expected the human to break under her stare. Most aliens did, but stood there quietly as if he were simply meeting another traveler on a lonely road. The silence in the hall grew heavy. The nobles whispered harshly among themselves. A human, how pathetic. He should be begging already. What arrogance to stand before the queen like that. Raised one hand and silence fell instantly. Her voice echoed through the chamber, strong and sharp. Human, your vessel crossed into restricted territory. You resisted capture. You endangered my patrol fleet. Give me one reason I should not erase your species from my map. Her words were meant to crush him. Instead, breathed slowly, as though gathering old memories around him like a comforting cloak. He looked up, meeting her golden eyes. You can erase planets, he said softly, but you can't erase what people carry inside. The hall fell silent again, felt the air shift. What was this feeling? Surprise, curiosity, annoyance. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not without shaking, not without pleading for mercy. Are you not afraid of me? Asked. Shook his head gently. Fear only controls you if you let it. The queen leaned back, studying him the way a scientist studies something rare. She had interrogated kings, pirates, warlords, and commanders. They all broke beneath her sharp gaze or powerful aura. But this human, this fragile creature with soft skin and no weapons, stood as if her presence couldn't touch him. Human courage, she muttered, or human foolishness. Smiled faintly. Sometimes they are the same thing. Felt a strange pressure around her chest. Not pain, not anger, something she had not felt in years, an emotion she didn't have a name for anymore. She dismissed the court and ordered the guards to bring him to her private chamber. She wanted answers. She wanted to see the cracks in his confidence. She wanted to understand why a being so physically weak could stand before her like an equal. The corridor to her chamber was long and quiet. Walked between armored guards, yet he did not seem bothered by the heavy steps around him. His eyes moved slowly across the palace walls, admiring the glowing crystals and floating lanterns with a soft wonder, as if he appreciated beauty even on the edge of danger. Inside her chamber, sat on a smaller throne, more intimate, with no nobles watching. Speak, she commanded. What makes you so calm? Looked at his hands, then at her. Because humans learn to stand, he whispered, even when everything around them wants to break them. Felt her breath catch. This human was different. Too different. And something inside her, something buried for years, woke up a little as she listened to him. The queen who ruled an empire suddenly felt the stir of a story she didn't understand yet. But she would soon, after the guards left, studied the human more closely in the quiet of her private chamber. The room, filled with warm light and floating crystal orbs, had always been a place where secrets could be uncovered. Today, the secret might be a human. Hale sat calmly, as if he belonged there, though he had crossed countless worlds just to reach this palace. His eyes were steady, and his posture showed neither fear nor arrogance, only a quiet certainty that puzzled the queen. I do not understand you, said, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. Humans are small, weak, fragile, and yet you stand before me without trembling. Why? looked up and smiled faintly. It was not a proud smile, nor a mocking one. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they have survived storms no one can see. "Because we've always had to," he replied. "Humans survive when the universe pushes us down. We get stronger because we have no choice. And sometimes we fight not for ourselves, but for others." Felt her heart tighten. She had conquered empires, defeated fleets, and broken entire civilizations. And yet, she could not fully comprehend this small creature who spoke like he carried centuries of courage in his chest. "Explain," she said, leaning forward. "Explain how a species so weak can survive." His voice was calm but full of weight. "You think strength is only in armies and weapons. You think power is measured in firepower, in shields, in fleets. But humans measure strength by will, by hope, by love, by the promise that we protect those who cannot protect themselves." Frowned, no ruler had ever spoken of love in the council halls. Love was considered weakness, a distraction. And yet this human made it sound unstoppable. "Your words are beautiful, human," she said. "But words alone do not stop empires from falling. How can something so simple matter against power like mine?" Looked directly at her, and for a moment the air itself seemed to pause. "Because power without heart is empty. An empire can crush planets, but it cannot crush what drives people to rise again. Even if your armies break, even if your fleets burn, humans, one or many, stand when nothing else does." The queen remained silent, her mind spinning. He was supposed to be insignificant, yet she felt the weight of his words pressing against her reason, against the steel of her logic. "You speak as if you know this from experience," she said finally, curiosity overtaking her caution. "Tell me, have you faced great danger?" Nodded, his eyes darkening for a moment. "I have watched my world crumble. I've seen friends die, families torn apart, and yet I survived. We all survived. Humanity does not wait for safety. We face the storm, and we carry others through it when they cannot." Leaned back in her throne, stunned. A quiet human this fragile creature was teaching her, queen feared across galaxies, something she had forgotten long ago. That true strength was not always in domination, but in the courage to rise again and protect life when it seems impossible. The chamber fell silent. Even the glowing orb seemed to dim as she considered him, this human who refused to be small, who refused to bow, and yet did not fight with claws or guns. He fought with spirit, with heart. "And you believe this strength can defeat any enemy?" she asked cautiously. Smiled faintly. "Not alone. But when people believe, when they fight for each other, they can survive storms no one else could imagine. Even gods fall when they underestimate the will of those they consider weak." Felt a shiver run down her spine. The queen who had ruled countless worlds realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. This human was not like any she had ever known. And perhaps he could show her a power greater than her empire itself. For the first time in years, did not feel like a queen. She felt like a student. And the human, unaware of the storm brewing beyond her palace walls, looked at her with calm eyes, as if he had always known she would learn this lesson one day. The queen's curiosity was no longer polite. It had turned into a fascination, a need to see the truth behind this fragile, fearless human. Little did she know, the truth carried would soon shake her empire to its very core. 3 days after calm words filled the queen's private chamber. The first alarms shook the empire. Towering observation spires across the capital blared red lights, and a deep, trembling hum ran through the streets. Citizens stopped in their tracks, soldiers stiffened, and even the most loyal generals looked to the sky with fear in their eyes. A shadow had appeared at the edge of space, a darkness so vast it swallowed distant stars. Reports called it the Devourer, a cosmic entity older than the oldest civilizations. It moved with deliberate, slow hunger, consuming entire star systems without mercy. Whole fleets sent to intercept it had vanished before even firing a single shot. Queen felt the familiar calm that always guided her falter. Her heart raced as she stood on her throne, staring at the holographic map that trembled with the readings of the approaching entity. Even her advisors, men and women who had faced warlords, rebellions, and planetary insurgencies, were pale and silent. "Your Majesty," one general whispered, "the Devourer is unlike anything we have seen. It will reach the outer moons in less than 2 cycles. Evacuation is our only option." Shook her head. She had never fled, and she would not start now. But deep inside, a cold tendril of fear wrapped around her chest. The empire she had built on strength, strategy, and fear suddenly felt fragile. She was used to enemies she could see, opponents she could measure. But this was a force of nature itself, and she had no measure for it. Standing quietly beside her, seemed unaffected. His calm gaze contrasted sharply with the panic around him. Could not help but glance at him. "Why are you not afraid?" she asked quietly, her voice almost lost in the hum of alarms. Turned to her with a small, steady smile. "Because humans have faced darkness before. We've stared at impossible odds and survived. Fear is only useful if it drives you forward." His brow furrowed. "Impossible odds?" "Yes," replied. "Humans are not the strongest in size or firepower. We are not immortal, but we endure. And when others cannot fight for themselves, we carry them. That is our power." She stared at him, stunned. How could a human speak so boldly when her empire, her fleet, her weapons, could be obliterated by the shadow approaching their borders? The council called an emergency meeting in the royal chamber. Every strategy they proposed failed before the words left their mouths. Evacuate. The Devourer would devour everything before the fleet could leave. Attack. Their strongest weapons would be crushed. Hide. No planet in the empire was safe. Remained silent, feeling the weight of leadership more heavily than ever. The empire she had ruled with certainty now trembled under a force that did not answer to armies, treaties, or fear. "Human," she said finally, her voice soft but urgent. "Tell me, what should we do?" The room went silent. Her generals turned toward with disbelief. The queen, feared, untouchable, was asking a human for advice. Looked at the map, then at her, and said something that sent shivers down her spine. "You cannot defeat the Devourer with fleets or weapons. Only by using something more, something humans have and most civilizations have forgotten." Leaned forward, her golden hair falling like liquid light. "And what is that?" His gaze was calm, unshaken by the dread filling the chamber. "The strength to rise when the universe wants to crush you, the power to fight for others when everything seems lost. Humans call it will, and I can show you how to awaken it." A murmur ran through the council. They had all heard of humans before. They had mocked them, dismissed them. Yet here, standing on the edge of annihilation, a single human spoke with confidence that dwarfed their most brilliant tacticians. His chest tightened. She realized the truth, terrifying and beautiful all at once. She had underestimated humans. She had ruled galaxies, yet she now wondered if a single human might hold a power greater than her entire empire. The Devourer loomed closer every moment. The shadows it cast stretched across the stars, and the queen, for the first time in her life, looked at a human, not with disdain, not with suspicion, but with curiosity, hope, and fear. Hale, small and fragile to any eye, had become the only spark that might save them all. And Queen knew the empire she had built would never be the same again. The Devourer's shadow stretched across the outer moons of the empire, bringing a silence that made even the busiest cities feel empty. The queen walked through her palace corridors, her golden robe brushing the floor, but for the first time in her life, her steps were heavy. The air that once filled her with confidence now pressed against her chest like a weight she could not lift. Her generals, normally so decisive, came to her with fear in their eyes. "Your Majesty," one said, trembling, "we cannot fight this. Our fleets will be crushed. Evacuation is the only option." Clenched her fists. She had faced rebels, assassins, rival empires, and even cosmic storms. But this was something she could not command or control. And yet she could not run. She could not abandon her people. Hale, the human prisoner, stood quietly at her side. His calm presence contrasted sharply with the fear around her. The queen glanced at him, and for the first time she felt the sting of doubt, not about her empire, but about herself. "Why do you not tremble?" she whispered, almost to herself. His eyes met hers. "Because fear only matters if you let it win. You can lead an empire by strength, but true leaders inspire people to stand when all seems lost. Humans, we survive because we refuse to give up on each other. His throat tightened. She had ruled through fear, through order, through power. But now, listening to this human, she felt something she had forgotten long ago: hope. The council called an emergency meeting in the throne room. Sat at the head, her eyes scanning the fearful faces of her advisors. Every plan they suggested ended the same way: destruction. Retreat was futile. Attack was suicide. No strategy could stop the devourer. She looked at, and her voice trembled slightly. You said humans can face the impossible. Tell me, what would you do in our place?" The room went silent. Her generals stared in disbelief. The Queen, the ruler of 50-star systems, was asking a human prisoner for advice. Stepped forward. "You cannot fight this with ships or weapons. Not yet. You need something else. Something most civilizations have forgotten." "What?" demanded. Her golden eyes narrowed, a mixture of curiosity and frustration. "The strength to rise when everything wants to crush you," he said calmly. "Humans carry it in their hearts. It's not about firepower or armies. It's about will and courage and the refusal to let others fall alone." Felt her chest tighten. She had always seen strength as domination, as victory in battle, as control over others. And yet this human, fragile, small, and unarmed, spoke with a power that made her feel powerless in comparison. "You expect me to trust a human with my empire?" she asked, her voice low, but her own doubt creeping in. Did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked out at the distant shadow, the darkness that consumed everything it touched. "I do not ask for trust," he said. "I ask for belief. Believe in what you cannot see yet. Believe that your people can rise with the right guidance. You don't have to fight alone." His hands gripped the armrests of her throne. The Queen, who had never wavered, now realized how little she truly understood the strength of life itself. Her empire was powerful, but she was only human. Her people were counting on her. And yet, she had in front of her a human who carried a quiet light stronger than any starship, stronger than any weapon. For the first time in her life, the Queen felt fear for herself, not for her empire, but for what would happen if she failed to see the truth. I don't know if we can survive this," she whispered, almost to herself. Stepped closer, placing a hand gently on the edge of the throne. "You will," he said softly. "Not because of fleets, not because of weapons, but because humans, because life does not give up. And you can learn to lead in a way even your enemies cannot predict." The Queen exhaled slowly. She realized that survival now depended on trust, on hope, and on a courage she had not yet known. And for the first time in decades, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt since she was a child: belief. The devourer approached closer, its shadow stretching across the empire, but standing beside, felt a strange warmth. She did not yet know how they would win, but she knew one thing with certainty: she would face it, and she would not face it alone. For the first time in her reign, the Queen believed that even the smallest being could ignite the power to change the fate of the stars. The devourer had reached the outer moons of the empire. Its shadow stretched across the land, blotting out the sky, turning day into night. The winds of distant stars whipped through the cities, shattering windows and toppling towers. Citizens screamed, soldiers froze, and even Queen felt her heart pound with fear she had never known before. Her golden robe shimmered in the dim emergency lights as she rushed to the palace balcony. The entire empire trembled under the presence of this cosmic terror. Weapons fired futilely into the void, beams of energy burning away into nothing. For the first time in her life, the Queen felt powerless. Hale stood quietly beside her, unarmed and calm. His chest rose and fell steadily, his eyes focused on the looming darkness, and his presence brought a strange, comforting energy even in the midst of chaos. Could not understand it. How could a human, so small, face an entity capable of destroying planets without showing fear? "You cannot fight that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You will die." Turned to her with a faint, gentle smile. "Maybe I will," he admitted softly. "But if I run, your people die, your empire dies, and everything you've built disappears." Felt her chest tighten. She had always ruled through strength, through strategy, through fear, and now she realized that strength alone would not save them. You are willing to sacrifice yourself for us?" she asked, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. His gaze softened. Because humans fight hardest when it's not for themselves. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. That is our true power. Before she could reply, a pulse of light erupted from his chest. The air trembled and the palace balcony shook violently. Dust and shards of crystal floated in the sudden energy wave. The devourer shrieked, a sound that echoed through space, shaking the stars themselves. The human's body glowed like molten white fire. His energy radiated outward, bending the darkness around him. Stumbled backward, shielded by the protective force emanating from him as the shadows recoiled from his light. "You want to see our true power?" His voice echoed across the night, strong and clear. "Humans have something no weapon can destroy, the courage to rise when everything is lost, the will to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The devourer surged forward, attempting to crush the light, but met it head-on. Beams of pure energy collided with the cosmic shadow, creating explosions of brilliance that lit up the empire like a second sun. The ground trembled beneath the force, and even the strongest towers shivered. Watched in awe and disbelief, the human, fragile, small, unarmed, was not just surviving. He was fighting, bending the rules of the universe itself. Each pulse of his energy drove the darkness back, each cry of defiance weakening the devourer. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the truth. She had underestimated humans. She had thought strength was measured in fleets, in armies, in weapons. But here, before her eyes, a human proved otherwise. Strength could come from spirit, from will, from the refusal to leave others behind. His glow intensified, his silhouette now surrounded by blinding light. The devourer shrieked again, convulsing under a power it had never faced before. Stars cracked in distant orbits. Galaxies trembled, and still the human pressed forward, his courage unshakable. The queen, trembling, whispered to herself, This is impossible, and yet it is happening." And then she understood. The empire could survive. The people could survive. Not because of her throne, not because of her fleets, not because of her power, but because of a human who refused to accept defeat. Hale, the small, unarmed human, had revealed a truth older than empires. Courage and willpower could surpass the strength of gods. And in that moment, Queen realized that her life and the fate of the stars had changed forever. The devourer roared like a collapsing galaxy, its voice shaking the heavens and splitting the skies over the empire. The planet beneath the palace trembled violently, fissures cracking across the ground, buildings swaying like fragile reeds. Citizens ran in terror, soldiers hesitated, and even the queen felt her knees weaken under the weight of impending doom. But Hale, the human who had once seemed so fragile, stood at the forefront of the chaos. His body radiated white light, pure and unyielding, and the energy around him made the shadows of the devourer recoil. His calm eyes, fixed on the approaching darkness, held a courage that reason. Shouted, rushing to his side. Her golden robe flared in the wind as the palace shook. "You cannot face that alone, you will die." He turned to her, faintly smiling, and the warmth in his gaze calmed a storm in her chest. "Maybe," he admitted, "but if I do not fight, your people die, your empire dies, you die, everything ends, I cannot run." Felt tears sting her eyes. She had faced countless battles, commanded thousands of soldiers, and conquered worlds. But she had never seen someone willing to risk everything, not for power, not for glory, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Lifted his hands, and a pulse of blinding light surged from his chest. The air trembled, buildings shook, and even the devourer reeled back under the force. Energy waves collided with the cosmic shadow, creating a spectacle of white fire against the endless darkness. "Humans fight hardest for others," shouted, his voice echoing across the battlefield. "We refuse to leave anyone behind." The devourer surged forward again, sending waves of dark energy to crush him, but met each attack head-on. His light bent reality, creating shields of pure willpower, turning the devourer's attacks back against it. The sky lit up with explosions of energy, streaks of white and gold clashing against the void. Standing on the balcony, could only watch in awe. Her heart pounded not from fear alone, but from wonder. The human's power was not just in strength, it was in courage, in determination, in the refusal to surrender. The light that poured from him seemed endless, a testament to every human who had ever faced impossible odds. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, This is impossible, and yet it is happening." His glow intensified. His form now shone like a comet made of living fire. The devourer shrieked, staggering under his unyielding will, but it still lunged forward, desperate and furious. Each pulse from the human carved through its shadow, pushing it back inch by inch. The queen realized, with a mixture of awe and humility, that fleets and weapons could only go so far. The devourer's shadow was too vast, too ancient, too powerful for brute force alone. But courage, his heart, his humanity, it was a force the universe itself could not ignore. Shouted, his voice gentle but commanding through the roaring chaos, "Your people can survive this. Stand with me, believe." She took a deep breath, her heart filled with hope and fear together. She raised her hand and shouted to the palace guards and the citizens below, "Do not give in, fight, survive." Her voice, filled with emotion, carried across the empire, stirring courage in hearts that had known only fear. The devourer, now battered by the light, shrieked one last time before staggering backward. Its massive shadow trembled and fractured, unable to withstand the relentless will of the human before it. His chest heaved, exhaustion etched into his glowing figure, but he remained standing. His eyes found the queen, and in that moment she saw not just a human, she saw hope, courage, and the true meaning of strength. Ran to him as he floated down toward the palace. "You've saved us all," she whispered, tears streaming freely. How can someone so small hold such power?" He smiled faintly, his light softening. "It is not about size, Majesty. It is about what we fight for. That is what makes humans unstoppable." For the first time in centuries, the queen felt a wave of relief wash over her. The empire had survived, not because of weapons, not because of strategy, but because one human had shown the universe what true courage could do. And in that shining moment, realized that her world and her heart would never be the same again. The devourer was gone. Its darkness had vanished, scattered into the void by the unrelenting courage of one human. The stars above the empire shone again, bright and steady as if nothing had ever threatened them. Yet the empire itself was forever changed. Cities were damaged, fleets destroyed, and the people had seen a power they could hardly believe. Queen stood on the balcony of her palace, overlooking the capital. Her golden robe fluttered in the calm wind, and her eyes, once hardened by centuries of rule, now shimmered with emotion she had not felt in years. The empire she had built through fear, strategy, and dominance had survived not because of her power, but because of a human named Hale. Rested in the throne room, still glowing faintly from the effort it had taken to drive back the devourer. He was exhausted but alive. For the first time in her life, did not stand above someone. She stood beside him, humbled and awed. "You've saved everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. How can one human do what armies and fleets could not?" Looked up at her, his smile gentle and tired. "Because humans fight not for power, not for glory, but for each other. That is something no empire, no fleet, no weapon can match." Swallowed hard, feeling a warmth in her chest that had been buried beneath years of ambition and command. She realized that all the fear she had used to rule, all the control she had wielded, was only part of true strength. True strength, real, unstoppable strength, came from courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand when all hope seemed lost. She reached out and took his hand, steadying him. "Walk with me," she said softly, "not as a prisoner, not as a hero of the empire, but as someone who changed it forever." Nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had faced countless dangers in his life, but nothing compared to the quiet honor of standing beside a queen who had learned to see humans as they truly were. The citizens of the empire slowly began to emerge from their shelters, peeking from broken streets and shattered towers. They had witnessed the impossible, the power of a human who refused to surrender. And in their eyes, they no longer saw weakness, they saw hope. Raised her hand, and the people fell silent, listening to the voice that had once commanded them through fear. Now it carried something far more powerful, inspiration. "Your empire is safe," she said. "Not because I rule it, not because of weapons or fleets, but because we now understand courage. because we now understand that even the smallest among us can shine brighter than the darkest night. Today, we have learned what it truly means to survive, to protect, to live for each other. Cheers rose through the streets. For the first time in generations, her people did not cheer for power or fear. They cheered for life, for courage, for humanity. Stood beside her, no longer just a human, but a symbol of everything the Empire could become. And realized something she had never admitted to herself before. She had been stunned, not by a weapon, but by heart, by will, and by humanity itself. In the following days, the Empire began to rebuild, helped guide them not as a ruler, but as a teacher of courage. He shared stories of human resilience, of ordinary people facing impossible odds, of hope surviving even in darkness. And Queen, once the most feared ruler in 50-star systems, walked beside him, learning, listening, and growing. She had ruled with strength for centuries, but now she understood that strength could also come from compassion, from belief, and from the courage to fight for others. As the twin suns rose over the capital, casting golden light across the repaired towers and streets, and stood together. The Empire had survived, not because of fear or power, but because of a truth the stars themselves could not ignore. Humans are not weak. Humans are unstoppable when they fight for what is right, and one human's courage can change the fate of 1,000 suns. And in that shining moment, the Queen smiled, knowing her empire and her heart would never be the same again.